Do you want to wait one more minute, Mary Jo, and then we can get started in case we have any other folks joining us?
100%. Yep.
Sounds good. Well, happy Friday. Just quick happy Friday to those who are already here. We're glad to see you virtually.
Yes, it's always more fun to do these when we can actually see people come into the room. So thank you all. What do you say, Reese? Should we kick it off?
That sounds great to me. Go for it.
Okay. All right. Well, I just want to say welcome to everybody to the key conversation session of parent orientation. We are excited to be with you. My name is Mary Jo Dapry. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm also the director of Wolverine Wellness. And my co-presenter today is?
My name is Reese Havlatka. My pronouns are also she, her, hers. And I work in the Office of Student Conflict Resolution, or OSCAR, here at U of M.
So the purpose of our time together today really is to talk a little bit about what it's going to be like sort of to come back to an in-person campus experience. So for the students that are coming as first-year students, it's been an amazing sort of 15 months. So we want to acknowledge that this past year and a half has been challenging for everybody, and sort of all of the ideas of how we come back to campus are could be a little bit off center. And so we're going to talk a little bit about this, but we know one thing for sure, that starting college is an important milestone for you, for your student, and that we all approach it acknowledging the impact of the past 18 months. And what might we need to be considering as we think about other public health issues in addition to the pandemics, to really talk about how those might be impacting the experience of our students. Obviously, COVID-19 is not going to go away. We're going to continue to navigate the protocols, and they will still be in place. And that public health issue is not going to disappear. But we're also going to use the time today to talk about two other public health issues that really have significant impact on the student well-being on campus. And that really is the issues of alcohol and other drug issues and sexual misconduct issues. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how we approach those issues. We're going to talk about those issues in the context of healthy relationships, consent, and the values of our community. And we also want to make sure that everybody knows sort of how we approach and address those issues here at Michigan.
So as we talk together today, we are going to share some information about several units on campus, including the units that Mary Jo and I work for as offices that support students and support the student experience around these public health and public safety issues here at the University of Michigan. So by working together, we are seeking to support the whole student throughout their Michigan experience. And these offices serve as a resource and support for parents and families in addition to students. All of the contact information for all the offices we mentioned will be provided at the end of the webinar. And of course, this is being recorded for your reference as well. So first, let's talk about the Office of the Dean of Students. The Dean of Students is a terrific place to start if you as a parent or family member are unsure of a helpful entry point for any number of issues or questions or concerns or seeking of information that you might have to support your student during their time at Michigan. It's a large organization, many people work here, and there are lots of supports for students. The Dean of Students office is here to support you in navigating this complex organization and in navigating all of these resources available to you and to your students. So we really see the Dean of Students as the hub for a number of questions, issues, resources, supports, various kinds of assistance that's available here in student life. And so this can be support for individual students. It could be support for groups of students, if your students involved in a student organization or an affinity group. Lots of kinds of complex issues or questions might come up related to health or wellness, physical wellness, mental health, all sorts of things. And so this is a great place to start by contacting the Dean of Students if you're unsure where to go or looking for some more information. And next, we know Mary Jo shared that she's the director of Wolverine Wellness, and Wolverine Wellness is an excellent support for students as well. Again, really focusing on the health and wellness aspect of the student experience. In a few minutes, we'll talk about this holistic model for overall student wellness, and we'll talk about these dimensions of wellness that are all related to each other. And Wolverine Wellness uses this same model to think about what our resources support, prevention, response, information, workshops, lots of kinds of resources for students to help them navigate the ups and downs of life. Right? How do we navigate this together, and what are the types of support that we need for students' overall wellness to support them in the goals that they have for their time at Michigan? I shared that I work in the Office of Student Conflict Resolution. We know that conflict is a part of the ups and downs of life and is a very normal part of a transition into a new environment. We don't have to be afraid of conflict. And so we have a resource here, Oscar, available for students for any number of kinds of conflicts that might come up, big or small. So a number of students come to us seeking help about any number of kinds of conflicts that might come up. We have lots of resources and communication strategies and support for students. And if they need help for a more formal process, if something more serious has happened, we're here to help with that too. The last office that we'll talk about as our intro here is the Sexual Assault Prevention and Awareness Center, or SAPAC, because you know we love acronyms in higher education. And a similar theme in that SAPAC offers both prevention, preventative support and information and resources, as well as aftercare and around healing and connection for students who might be experiencing any number of things as a part of their life experience, life's ups and downs. So a great part of our environment on campus. You'll see lots of workshops, lots of resources, lots of ways that students can engage in conversation around healthy relationships as, again, they're navigating this new environment and thinking about what feels good, what feels right for them in this next chapter of their life. And so we have shared some information about some different offices on campus. And as we think about the staff who are here to support your students, as we think about these concepts around alcohol and drug use, and we think about healthy relationships and overall health and wellness, we're also viewing this from the lens of some shared values. And so we wanted to talk about the values that the University of Michigan has for our campus community. And you'll see this list that's laid out here. And this is a list of values that has been community generated. And we review these values every few years as an entire campus community, certainly including students, to think about how do we want to be in relationship as a community? How do we want to be in relationship with each other? What do we hope for our time together? What is our vision for that time? And so these values inform how we treat each other, how we expect to be treated as members of this community. And all members of our community agree to uphold and live out these values in our time at U of M together. And these values serve as guideposts for behavioral expectations of students through the Statement of Student Rights and Responsibilities, so the main body of policies for student expectations for students' behavior. And at the same time, we also know that students come to campus with their own values that have been informed by important lived experiences in their lives. And so a core component to student success is knowing what their own values are and identifying ways to live out those values. So engaging in behavior that aligns with the values that they hold. And so the Expect Respect program, you see one of the insets here on this slide, is a campaign that's designed to promote Michigan values and to serve as a support for when those values aren't being lived out, right? Because again, we know that a lot of people are coming to this campus community trying to make sense of who am I, how do I want to be in relationship with others, what does it mean to be a member of a community in this way? So this program, the Expect Respect campaign, continues to support the goals of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which are central to our Michigan community. And so any member of our community who experiences treatment that's counter to these values can find support, can find resources to repair the harm to themselves, the harm to others, the harm to community. And that's true in every office within student life. So we are going to,
Reese, can I just jump in? I just want to encourage anybody, if you have questions, as we're going along. Both Reese and I are super passionate about these issues, and we can start talking really fast. And so I just encourage you, if you do have a question, please just put it in the Q&A part of this, and we will get to them. We also have people who are reading the Q&A while we're doing this who might be able to offer a quick answer. So I just wanted to just do a small step in and just encourage you to use that option.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Mary Jo. And yes, one of your questions could be, could you repeat that? I might be drinking some Friday afternoon coffee, and I might talk even faster than usual when I do that, when I get excited. So in addition to including any questions that you have in the Q&A function of the webinar, we also have our first of several polls. We'd love to get a sense of what feels important for you, what's coming up for you, questions, ideas that you have as you're thinking about supporting your student in their transition to U of M. So here's our first poll here. So I am going to both launch the poll and then I'll read it. So here we go. Launching the poll. So, whoops, sorry team. First question, sorry, let me go back. Oh, as I do this, well, you can see the poll. I sadly can't figure out how to go back in my presentation view. So let me, oh, we are having a Friday today. Thank you for joining. Here we go, previous, done it, here we are. So as you're reading the poll, which you probably have done at this point, so as we're thinking about the experience for our students as whole students, as holistic people, as you're thinking about success and support for your student coming on campus, what do you think contributes the most to student success? What might be the most important for your student as they're transitioning into their time at U of M? So could it be A, being involved on campus, B, remaining connected to friends and family, C, knowing campus resources, D, utilizing effective study habits, or E, engaging in health promoting practices? So let's take a moment and let's see what comes up for folks in the poll. And as folks are looking at this, oh, thank you for running this with us. Here's what we're going to do. I think that I just shared the incorrect poll with you. Thank you for running with this for us. I'm gonna end the polling here, and what I'm going to invite you to do in the Q&A is, if you want to, in the Q&A, type in there, if you haven't had a chance to finish the poll yet, to type in which one you think might be the most important. So thank you for those who are able to do the polling. And let's take a minute and have folks type in the Q&A the letter that they think corresponds to the most important aspect of student success. So you can just drop the letter in there if that's A, being involved on campus, B, remaining connected to friends and family, C, knowing campus resources, D, utilizing effective study habits, or E, engaging in health promoting practices. So just take a minute and type in the Q&A what you think might be great. Oh, I see a couple people are already in there. Yes. Oh, so far I'm seeing a lot of A's about being involved on campus. I see some D about effective study habits. Yep, I see some more A's. Yeah, so it sounds like for many of the parents and family members who are here, that the being involved on campus, we know how important that can be. And we know that there's no right answer, right? There's no right answer to this question. All of these are important components in terms of the transition into time in college. Certainly we know that there are a number of factors that make up student success. So because all of these can be important, all of these can make a difference in a student's experience in college. We encourage you to take the information from this webinar think about what might be some important conversations to start to have with your student or to continue to have with your student about living into their values, engaging on campus. What does it mean to maximize the campus experience using the resources that are available to them? And certainly engaging in health promoting behaviors. So especially in the time in the pandemic, what does it mean to transition away from home into college? What does it mean to ask for help as we're still in this time in the pandemic? What does it mean to prioritize sleep? How are we balancing all these new demands on time? And again, how are we navigating the ups and downs in life and really developing coping skills for a unique time in life? So my apologies for the poll issue. Thank you for, thanks for running that with me in the Q&A. And we will we'll continue our conversation.
So one of the things that's really important to us is to share the model of well-being that we use at the University of Michigan. And the model that, a fun fact that you might not know is that this model, the depiction of this model was actually created by U of M graphic design students. So we worked with them so that we had a unique model, especially in its visual representation. But a couple of things that we really prioritize is this idea of helping students really see their well-being in a holistic fashion, right? And that there are multiple dimensions which sort of impact each other. And what we really try to do for students is help them think about, sometimes I think social media, other types of media can really limit our idea of what wellness is or what well-being is. And sometimes people will just talk about it in terms of like exercise and diet. And at the University of Michigan, one of our goals really is to expand that idea of well-being, to think about sort of this multidimensional aspects to our well-being, and also think about how the community supports the well-being of everybody on campus. And so what you see here is the model that we use. It's not just a student model of well-being, it's actually shared with faculty, staff, and students. So the whole community shares this model. So one of the things that can sometimes happen is when we talk to students is they can really just define their well-being based on an academic framework. Like if I'm doing good in school, I'm doing well. And as somebody who's worked on a college campus for over 30 years, we also know that we can have students doing fairly well in school and have other dimensions of their well-being being impacted negatively. On the other hand, at the University of Michigan, all the students that come here are relatively bright. And this might be the first time that they get a grade that they haven't seen in a long time. And so even if they are struggling in their academics, doesn't necessarily mean that their overall well-being is suffering. And so I think for us, we wanted to share this with you because this is some of what we are sharing with all of the students. Someone put in the chat earlier in the Q&A, is this information getting shared with our first year students? Yes, we are sharing it in a couple different ways. And we also know that when students are just coming to campus, they need to hear things a few times because they are overwhelmed with all of the logistics of starting school. And so we wanted to share this model with you to help you understand how we look at holistic well-being at the personal and the community well-being part of that. And we will share this and all the other resources with students as they come, part of orientation, part of their first year experience, and then ongoing throughout their whole time here at the University of Michigan. The next thing that we're going to do is Reese is going to do another poll, and this is we're going to start to narrow in on those concepts that we talked about earlier. And this really one has to do with healthy relationships. So I'm going to let Reese go ahead and do it, and then I will talk a little bit about the answers as soon as we get done.
All right, so I am going to launch the poll. You might have noticed that one of the pedals in the wellness wheel was occupational wellness. And I'll just share briefly that my occupational wellness has certainly been impacted by my ability to navigate or inability to navigate Zoom. So thank you for being a part of that with me together. So we're talking about healthy relationships now. And so you'll see the poll that has opened correctly this time is asking you, of the following characteristics, which is the most important to have in a healthy relationship? So most important. Is it A, honesty, B, respect, C, open communication, D, trust, or E, shared values? So we'll take another bit of time, allow people to engage in this poll that is now correctly just the one question. Oh, sorry, team. Let's take a look and see how we're doing in the polls. Looks like about half of people have voted so far. Let's take another 10 seconds or so for those who'd like to share their thoughts in the poll of which is the most important characteristic. All right, we're going to close it under the wire now. Be part of the democratic process. We're going to close it in 3, 2, 1. So let me give you just a summary of what the results were there. So we had most people indicating that the most important characteristic of a healthy relationship is open communication. And we know open communication is ongoing, can involve a number of things like honesty and trust and respect. Certainly communication can be based on shared values, right? And then following open communication, honesty and respect, right? And we know that a number of these characteristics are related to each other or are dependent on each other, and they're not necessarily separate, right? So thank you for sharing those thoughts too. And we'll talk about how to continue this conversation with your students, right? Of like, what is a healthy relationship look like? And so let's talk a little bit about that now. And thinking about your role as parents and family members in exploring the concept of a healthy relationship or building on conversations you've already had, thinking about healthy relationships for your student and how those might evolve and change in their transition into college. So we know from research that parents and family members who have open conversations, who have that open communication with their students, have a significant impact on their students' exploration of healthy relationships and healthy decision making. So you are some key people in their lives. That's, I think, always been the case, and particularly now, right, in this season of transition, that you are key people to positively influence their engagement in healthy relationships and role modeling trust and respect and open communication in the ways we hope to see them be able to live into other relationships. And we know this is connected back with personal values. And we talked about community values, personal values. The more that a person understands their own values, the more comfortable they are, the easier it is to have conversations with other people about them and navigate conflict effectively, talk about needs and boundaries effectively. And we know from student development theory specific to college students that students in college are in a time of evaluating their personal values in relationship to the values of other people. How do I match up? Where am I similar or different? What does it mean to hold a value around respect? What does that look like for me compared to my friend? How am I navigating or understanding that? And then that helps them determine what their values actually are as they transition into adulthood, right? And into some more independence. And so when we're talking about these healthy relationships, these are not just tips for romantic relationships, although certainly this includes romantic relationships. We're also thinking about healthy friendships, people who they might be sharing space with as roommates, teammates, friends, sorority sister, a fraternity brother, siblings. You know, as we age, our relationships with siblings evolve and parents evolve. So really, this is talking about all kinds of relationships in our lives and the ways that we live our values into those relationships. So, you know, as you're spending the summer before students are coming to campus, we encourage you to talk with your students about healthy relationships that they've observed in life. Who are relationship role models for them? Why are those relationships a good model for them and what they hope to have or values that are important? What is it that they want to see in their own relationships? We know that within a healthy relationship, conflict still happens. That's why I have a job, right? So conflict, the presence of conflict does not mean that there is an unhealthy relationship. What are the ways that we can navigate conflict with open communication, with respect, with kindness, with shared values? What are different communication styles that we have, and how does that impact how we're engaging in conflict in constructive ways? So that can be a really important part of a conversation with your students too, or what do they know about their own communication style? What have they observed in others? And how does that relate to building a healthy relationship, including healthy expressions of conflict and resolving conflicts peacefully? Yeah, so really we're inviting you to create opportunities for your student to share with you. What have they experienced? What's on their mind? How will they take that with them during their time at Michigan? And we're going to do another poll. So thinking now about healthy relationships and consent, here comes another poll. So this poll is just another one question for you. And the question is, true or false, that most incoming first-year students at U of M understand how to get consent for sexual activity? Is it A, true, or B, false? We'll give you another couple seconds to vote. I'll share out what we notice, and then Mary Jo, I'll turn it over to you to debrief and move on. Oh, a flurry of them coming in. Make your voice heard. Tell us what you think. All right, we're going to close the poll in 3, 2, 1. So we had a consensus. It was unanimous. For the folks who answered the poll, the question being, most incoming first-year students at U of M understand how to get consent for sexual activity. 100% of our respondents said false, that most incoming first-year students at U of M do not understand how to get consent for sexual activity. Over to you, Mary Jo.
Wow, so that is, I think that's the first time I've been doing this in all these years to see 100% in anything. And what I'd love to do is just sort of like announce it's actually true. And this is one of those things that maybe semantics or nuance is really important. The data shows that when we ask students, do you understand the concept of consent? Do you understand what, they'll say yes. But when it actually comes to the skill, do you actually know how to do it? That's where the number goes way down. So when we think about this, it is not that they don't know it intellectually and can't sort of wrap their head around what the concepts are, but this is a really great, just because we know something doesn't mean we know how to do it, right? So information alone doesn't change behavior. So part of the reason we talk about this in particular, and especially in the context of healthy relationships and alcohol, is consent is a skill that will serve the students, like not just at their time here at the University of Michigan, but a lifelong skill. So when we will spend a lot of time introducing, affirming, maybe even checking some of your gut is that they might not understand it. So one of the things that we'll do is sort of establish a baseline definition of what consent is, making sure everybody's on the same page for that. And important and factors about consent that we will be helping them better understand is that consent is clear and unambiguous. It's enthusiastic, and it's an ongoing process. So just because you consent to something at one point in time doesn't mean you consent to something in perpetuity, right? And so these are the kinds of things that we really stress with students and help them understand. So understanding the concept, but also giving them opportunity for skill development. We also reinforce that sexual activity must include consent from all involved parties. So if and when they make that decision, if they've already made that decision, our information and guidance for them really is that helping them understand in terms of the framework, in terms of the legal framework, that sexual activity must include consent from all involved participants. The other thing to understand about consent and to be able to sort of talk about this with our students is that alcohol and other drug use may impair a person's ability to give or obtain consent. And this is one of the reasons that we really underscore these really powerful conversations that we can have with our students about the complexity and the overlap of these issues. And consent is, we're talking about it in the framework of sexual activity, we're talking about, but we also know that consent is a foundational skill for all of our relationships. They are going to be in roommate situations where they may be sharing food, they may be sharing screen time, they may be sharing other things, they may be sharing clothes, right? And so when we think about this skill, introducing this skill and helping them practice, it is as one of those foundational skills that will serve them throughout the rest of their life. It is really trying to help them connect the dots from their intellectual understanding to actually the skill behind it so that it can show up in the everyday of their behavior.
All right, you knew it was coming. Here's another poll, everybody. So continuing on our theme related to consent and alcohol and other drugs, we're gonna launch a poll here to ask your thoughts about alcohol use by first-year college students. So here we go. So could you share your thoughts in the poll for this question about which of the following best describes how you, so you yourself, how you view alcohol use by first-year students? Is it A, that it's illegal and they should not do it? Is it B, that many college students drink, it's part of college, let them have some fun? C, a young adult brain is still developing, so I or you believe alcohol use should be prevented? D, I don't mind as long as they get good grades? Or E, students feel social pressure to drink and are unsure how to say no? Oh, I'm seeing lots of questions coming in. And so I invite you to choose the one that rises to the surface for you. You might agree with more than one of these. What is sort of your initial response as what you think is the best description for you? So I'll give people about 10 more seconds to reflect their thoughts here. All right, as before, we are going to close the poll in 3, 2, and 1. Someone just got there. Good job. Okay, so the most common response, just over half of our respondents said E, that students feel social pressure to drink and are unsure how to say no. Valid point, right? The importance of practicing saying no, connecting the values, the personal values with boundaries, with consent, what feels comfortable for me, what feels good for me, what are the values that I have, and how can I as a college student translate that into saying no when that's something I need to say no to, and that's a boundary that I need to set, right? We know that helpful boundaries, that healthy boundaries around alcohol and drug use, certainly at all stages of life, certainly including college, can reduce harm, can promote well-being, right? So navigating that. The other 2 responses that we had were the very first one, A, that it is illegal and they should not do that. That is certainly also true, that is factual, and that it is illegal. And the University of Michigan recognizes and upholds laws related to alcohol and other drug use. So that is certainly true. And we know that more than one thing can be true at the same time, right? That the legal framework is certainly something that is important, that relates to health and safety, and is one of many frames that we can think about navigating change, navigating personal values, right? The other response that respondents indicated was C, that a young adult brain is still developing, so alcohol use should be prevented. Based on research, that's a concern that we share as well, right? So what does it mean to introduce large amounts of alcohol to a developing brain? What does that just mean from a biological health and safety standpoint? So what does harm reduction, what does risk reduction, what do boundaries look like there too? What's interesting is that I think this is the first group where no one has selected D with the I don't mind as long as they get good grades. That could certainly be a perspective that one or more people on the webinar today share. And when that comes up, we often just want to think back to that holistic model of well-being that Mary Jo shared, right? Where even if someone is having academic success, getting good grades, that doesn't mean that there aren't other areas of wellness that are being negatively impacted by something like high-risk alcohol or drug use, right? That all these things are connected. And so just on the surface, seeing good grades doesn't indicate that a person is well, right? Or is having some balanced health and wellness. So thank you so much for your thoughts on that. And let's keep talking about alcohol and other drugs on campus. So one of the things that, that staff like me, staff like Mary Jo have been talking about as we think about this coming fall is the experiences and therefore the values that our incoming students will have coming to college in this. I mean, it's not post-pandemic in the sense that this is, of course, still going on. We're still feeling the effects of the pandemic. But what experiences, what values or attitudes will people have around alcohol or drug use from these last 18 months? How will that affect people's needs or thoughts related to alcohol? If this is not a conversation you've had yet with your student, we really encourage you to do that. How are we making sense of this time that has happened that we're still in, and how does that connect with what they're looking for, what they're hoping for, what they're wanting to explore related to alcohol or drug use when they're coming to campus? We know that not just in pandemic times, we know that throughout time, we have decades of research that talk about how risky alcohol and other drug use are consistently public health issues, or can be, particularly for first-year college students on campus. Right, and so here we're thinking a lot about harm reduction and risk reduction in the sense of overall wellness and balance and connection, aligned with personal values. So in the last, in the poll, it talked about the concerns about impact of alcohol in a developing brain. We know from research that substance use can disrupt sleep, mood, relationships, brain development, and that this relates not just to physical health and safety and wellness, but also to relationships, also to academics, also to a sense of connection with the community, right? And so we have down at the bottom here, you'll see this, this spectrum, and this represents the experiences that college students may have had coming in to the university, right? That they could be in very different places with past experience related to drinking, so to alcohol specifically. That we know that there are students who have come to campus who have never had alcohol before, all the way to that they identify as an alcoholic and they're actively in recovery and maintaining sobriety, and everywhere in between. And that drinking experience that can change and that can fluctuate over time, over the course of a person's time in college. And so we're also thinking now with this overlay of the pandemic that people are on a spectrum in terms of what types of experiences they're looking for or hoping for. But I know that we'll have college students coming in who just think, no way, I have no interest in going to any kind of crowded party or sharing a cup with somebody. This is not anything that anyone needs to worry about. And other people who are thinking, oh, thank goodness, now it's my time to let loose and to explore my social life in this way, and everywhere in between. So we really invite you to talk with your student about where they are with things, what expectations you have for them in your supporting of them and your accountability and support as parents and family members. We know that at the University of Michigan that we have this comprehensive approach to addressing alcohol and other drug issues. And so it's important for you to know that there are a variety of substance-free events for students to go to throughout the year that help promote a sense of connection and wellness that are alcohol-free. And then at high-risk times of the year, university partners across campus and within the Ann Arbor community, we work together to help keep students safe and to encourage positive behavior. So an example of a high-risk time might be a home football game on a Saturday, right? That because of certain cultural norms or expectations around things like tailgating, that could be a time that somebody might engage in higher risk alcohol use than they otherwise would, right? So there are some particular times of the year where we really want to make sure that people have good information about health and safety. They have different events they can go to, that they have access to water and food, and any kind of support that they might need in navigating boundaries and navigating their personal safety. We do also enforce all state of Michigan laws, including those related to alcohol or other drugs. There's been a recent change in state law in Michigan in terms of legalization of cannabis. And so my understanding is that there'll be some additional information for parents and family about laws and policies about alcohol and other drugs, particularly if you're from outside of the state of Michigan. And so now over to you, Mary Jo.
Yeah, I think one of the huge opportunities of this session is to really just shine a spotlight on the incredible influence that parents and families still have on their students. And somebody had put in the Q&A earlier, you know, that we keep suggesting that people have these conversations, but it's often at a time when their students are sort of disconnecting and listening less and less. And one of the things I would just assure you is that we have really good research, definitive research on the positive impact parents' conversations have on students, even if you think they're not listening. It is one of the single most powerful tools that we have. And don't hear me say that as like you should lecture your students on alcohol and other drugs. That's really not what I'm saying. But to sort of pivot and have these really mutual listening conversations around what their values are, what their expectations are in terms of socializing, what they want out of a good first year experience at the University of Michigan. What might they need to do that? But all of us, and I will just tell you, for every year I've done parent orientation, this is often a worry. Parents are just like, I'm afraid they're not listening to me anymore, and it's just not worth it. And one of the things I can assure you is the data says it, and even the surveys of our current students say it. We say, who is the most powerful influence on some of the decisions you make at the University of Michigan? And they always talk about their parents and their family. So even if it's a stumbling through it conversation, even if you're just like, you know what, this is going to be awkward for both of us. I have a lot of parents who say, I don't know where to start. And we have all sorts of resources on our websites that we can send you, and our parent family communication websites that can give you that information. But we really are encouraging you to start those conversations. And instead of that, sometimes the fear makes us sort of go into that just do what I say kind of mode. What we can do is really have it go back to those values that Reese was talking about earlier in this session today. Is what are your values? What are you hoping to say is true about your first year at the University of Michigan? And what do you think are going to be some important sort of guardrails to make sure that those kinds of things happen? We also know that we are in this together. We really consider the relationship that we have with parents and families mutual. And so one of the things we have in place is called the Parent Family Communication Program, which means that we're not going to call you every time something happens. But there is something called Parent Family Communication where we do let you know if we see repeated behavior around alcohol and other drug use, or we see one incident of pretty significant circumstance or outcome. We do, but we don't send it sort of in a punitive way. We don't say your child got in trouble. What we say is, or your student got in trouble. What we really say is, we want to do something early to prevent sort of a full sort of 90-degree turn that gets somebody way off course, and then really partner together to have a conversation about well-being and values with that student. So they have the chance to sort of course correct. And we do that. And so, but we know that these parent family-based interventions combined with the harm reduction strategies that Reese was talking about do lead to fewer alcohol-related consequences. And so it's such an important point about it. And there are guidelines. So for people who are just like, I'm not even sure how to bring it up. One of the things I will tell you when students end up in my office is that the genuine and authentic attempt for a parent to engage in this conversation and to say, this really matters to me. I really care about this. I really care about you. Can we talk about this? Has such a profound impact on them. And so, and we also just don't have it be all on you either. One of the things I was going to say in the consent, when we were talking about consent equally with the alcohol and other drugs, is we also require students to take some online courses, and we're going to tell you about those in a little bit, but they also help. So one way that parents have sort of broached this discussion is just ask the student, I know you had to take these online courses. One was on sexual assault, one was on alcohol and other drugs. What did you think about it? What did you already know? What was new information? What resources did you learn? So we also try to give you something as a catalyst for dialogue based on these courses. So we just wanted to make sure that you also knew that can sometimes be a great catalyst for these conversations.
So thank you, Mary Jo. So spoiler alert, newsflash, there are a lot of students at the University of Michigan. It's a big place. Maybe someone told you, maybe you already knew. So there are more than 46,000 students on campus. And the great news is that there are a lot of resources, a lot of supports, lots of ways to get involved. The challenge with that is that it can be tough to know where to start, right? So this is back to this continuum that we saw for the alcohol and other drug spectrum of like, no matter where students are with regard to their values, alcohol or drug use, relationships, there are lots of ways to find connections at U of M and lots of ways for students to actively seek out these opportunities. And student life plays a central role in that. So let's talk more about that. So Mary Jo referenced a few online programs that students will complete, several of which will happen before a student even comes to campus. So you see on this timeline here that in the next few weeks, students will be prompted via email to start these online courses. You can see that there are 3 that they're expected to complete in August. So just like Mary Jo mentioned, one related to alcohol harm reduction, one that relates to health and safety related to sexual assault prevention, and then another one that's specific to COVID, right? So wellness during the times of COVID, staying healthy in a changing environment. And these are all a part of the first year experience programs. And these programs here are really just one part of a comprehensive first year experience that's tailored to new students navigating campus. So the staff who work in the first year experience FYE, their contact information is also included in the webinar. So we can see that, that the students will have a chance to start with the FYE program, start with these webinars before they even come to campus, including the other Getting to Know Michigan webinars as well. And then early on in the school year, there's another online opportunity called Community Matters regarding relationships, consent, boundaries, all the things that we've been talking about. And these, of course, will be online related to COVID. So just like Mary Jo said, in this next month, as students are completing those, what a great entry point for starting some conversations or continuing conversations you've already had. And then thinking too beyond these required programs, right? We know from one of the polls, you all told us that you knew how important student involvement, student engagement is as a part of student life. And we know that there are lots of opportunities for students to seek out small groups, large groups based on their interests. There are so many different student organizations on campus related to all kinds of interests, different things to learn, ways to get involved, all kinds of things that a student might be interested in that could help align with their personal values, with their passions for their exploration of self and a community. There are resource navigators who are available to assist students in their acclimating to campus and finding community, because sometimes we can feel overwhelmed by choice. The good news here too is that particularly in the time of COVID, still wanting to promote health and safety related to the pandemic, there are lots of ways to engage that aren't only in person, right? So a student's only opportunities to get involved are not just going to be going to like, huge, large group events, right? Lots of ways for people to get involved. And again, that's why some of the Welcome to Michigan webinars will be really important for helping a student navigate and deciding what some of their next steps are with involvement.
So this next one really is what you can do. And we've talked a little bit about it already. And I think maybe you've heard the message is to take advantage of what we know to be a powerful opportunity is to talk to your student about their overall well-being. And the conversations get to shift a little bit. I can't really tell by a show of hands how many of you have already sent somebody off to campus, but you know that the conversations that we have with them when they're a junior in high school, when they're a senior in high school, when they're a first year student, it starts to shift a little bit, right? And so I think the most important thing is to keep the conversation going and adapt it for their own development and their own growth, right? Encourage the students to be thoughtful about their plans. One of the things that we know is that when people are thoughtful and mindful and intentional, they don't get caught up in groupthink, right? And so giving them the permission and the skills to sort of just take a deep breath and make mindful and thoughtful choices can really disrupt that and just going along with the crowd mentality. We also know the first 6 weeks can help define their college experience. And so, people really can do this different ways, but talk to them about how are you going to approach the beginning of school. And then sort of when you put sort of how you're going to approach the beginning of the school, coming out of a pandemic, right? So we had, and maybe some of you can even remember this with your own circle of friends, is we know that people sort of coped with the pandemic using alcohol and other drugs. It was one of the coping tools we saw across the country. And then if you sort of flash forward to today, we can also see that there are a lot of people who are still trying to navigate how to be social again. And this will be the same for all the students that are coming back to campus. So a couple things, just so you know, we know that, and we are trying to be very intentional about how we're addressing this with students. But I think it also provides more material for you to have those conversations with. And the next really important thing is the connection and the bridges to campus. So Reese, if you'll go to this next one. One of the things that we know is students don't come to Ann Arbor, don't come to campus sort of as a blank slate. They come with all of the challenges they've been navigating up to this point in their life. And sometimes what happens if we're not intentional about it is making sure we bridge the care that they were getting at home, that they were getting at school, to really great resources here at the University of Michigan. And so one of the things that we can do is really help you understand. So if they are somebody who's already been taking advantage of counseling resources, can you help them say, okay, what kind of plan could you put in place? What would that look like here on campus? For physical health, for many of them, they've never scheduled a doctor's appointment before. And I know that you heard the UHS session, so I won't go into that, but right, it's these things that help them sort of bridge care. And then for alcohol and other drug use, right, we have students along that continuum, and Wolverine Wellness is prepared, as with all of our colleagues across campus, is to meet students wherever they're at on that continuum. I do want to make a special shout out to the Collegiate Recovery Program. If you are a parent of a student who is in recovery, we have a dynamic recovery support group for those students who are navigating college life sober, and they are incredible. And so really just wanted to make sure to call that out. We also wanted to give you a little bit more information about all of the offices that we talked to today. So I'm just going to do another shout out for the Dean of Students office. I know as part of all of these parent orientation sessions, you all are getting just slammed with resources after resources. And so again, when in doubt, or if you just need a little bit of wayfinding, the Dean of Students office can be that central resource. We've also included the other resources here that we've mentioned, so that you can have a website and that you can have a phone number, so that these conversations, and I will tell you that at least once a week, I probably get a parent phone call and just saying, I just need to sound this out. I just need to sort of think about how I'm thinking about this, or where is the best place for me to get information. All of us do that, and we're really welcoming you to partner with us in that way. We also want to show you, if you can go to that next slide, Reese, this is a website that is really at every single student's fingertips. So this website is called the Student Wellbeing website. You can see the URL address, but it's also available to all students right on their Canvas site, which is where all of their classes are. And when students click on that little model of well-being, that little colored model that looks like a flower, it opens up into lots of different things. It talks about what well-being is. It has lots of different take a breaks. It's even got some little menus and stretches and sort of mindfulness experiences, but it also has this place called Find a Resource. So students can type in anything. If they love sort of therapy dogs and want to know where they are on campus, they can just type therapy dog in there and it will come up of where they are on campus. And we really wanted to share this with you. So if you have a student going, I have no idea where this is, you can say, get on that well-being site, type it in the search and see what comes up, right? That's one way. The other really cool thing on here is you can see that there's an events tab on this one. It also shows students all the events on campus that support their well-being. And so that's a curated calendar of all well-being events on campus. So we wanted to just share you a little bit about what they have at their resources so that maybe you can remind them when they're in those moments of, I just don't know where to go. This is one of those resources that can help them find their way. I also maybe just, Reese, if I can take 2 more minutes, is we sort of focused on these 4 offices, and we are also really clear that there are so many other offices that support student well-being on campus. If we think about all the identity-specific offices, if we think about the Spectrum Center, if we think our multi-ethnic student affairs office, if I think about the services for students with disabilities office, we have a ton of offices that we didn't talk about today that really join with us in the support of students' well-being. And that's really why we wanted to make sure that you knew about this website, because it can also be a tool to bridge to care for those other areas and those other units on campus.
All right, thank you so much, Mary Jo. So folks, we have arrived at our final poll. I know, probably a big emotional response here. So, so as we think about all this information that we've covered related to personal values and healthy relationships and alcohol and other drug use and consent and all of these things, thinking about what's a next step in your conversations with your student, right? So what will you do next? What will you do first? Knowing that there are a number of conversations to continue throughout their time at college, right? What are we going to prioritize first? So let me open the poll and we'll talk through them together. So what is the next step for you in terms of your next key conversation? Are you going to focus on A, values and expectations and decision-making, B, elements of being a successful student, of which there are many, as we've talked about, C, dimensions of well-being, again, there are many, D, healthy relationships and consent, E, alcohol and other drug use, F, the first year experience or FYE online programs, some of the required ones that we talked about, or G, bridging or establishing care on campus. So what's that next step look like for you, for your family, for your students specifically? Let's take a look. Ooh, responses are coming in. Oh, so many different ideas here. I love this. Let's take about 10 more seconds so people can make that plan in their mind, hold that intention in their mind. What is this next conversation I want to have with my student? All right, we're going to close the poll in 3, 2, and 1. Well, this was a wonderful and very broad response because, of course, there's no right answer to this. So it looks like just over half of people, the next piece for them is going to be dimensions of well-being. And since we know that touches on so many areas of life, what a great entry point for any number of next conversations that you want to continue, right? There's no right place to start. I see about a number of people are also thinking about values and expectations and decision-making, again, because that can overlap with so many areas here. Ooh, I see the healthy relationships and consent. Somebody responded affirmatively to every single one of these. So that's excellent. Sounds like you have a sense of what feels like some important next steps for you, a sense of where your student is with things and what will be important in this time of transition. So again, thank you so much for having those conversations and continuing those conversations, since, as Mary Jo mentioned, we know from research how tremendously important those are. So we want to say thank you to you for your time and your attention today, and for bearing witness to our, the ritual of a Zoom poll disaster, an important cultural practice. Thank you for your time. We're so grateful to have seen you virtually. And I think we're at time, so thank you for asking your questions. And we really value your partnership as we support students here on campus. Thank you so much and take care.